If you enjoy a good murder mystery, the new Clue Escape game is where it's at. Everything you love about the original Clue game, but with an escape room twist. Join forces with your friends to escape Mr. Body's mansion, then work together to solve the murder. Was it Colonel Mustard in the conservatory with the lead pipe? Mrs. Peacock in the kitchen with the candlestick? You'll have to play to find out. Clue Escape Game. This new one-time solve mystery game is a must-have escape room experience you can bring home for your next game night. Clue is a trademark of Hasbro.
The calendar is flipped to October, and that means the MLB postseason is back on TBS. Watch the biggest names and brightest stars in the American League take the field and battle it out for a spot in the World Series. Catch all the jaw-dropping action starting October 11th on TBS. And stay with us all month long as we crown an American League champion. You're not going to want to miss all the slick plays, crazy hits, and clutch performances that make postseason baseball America's greatest pastime. From the ALDS to the ALCS, TBS has you covered this October.
The case of a missing Indigenous Alaska woman sparks new questions about other missing and murdered Indigenous women. But when the cops stop looking, a team of local journalists step in to bring the truth to light. That's where ABC's thrilling new drama, Alaska Daily, begins. And where it's headed will have you on the edge of your seat. Starring two-time Oscar winner Hilary Swank, Grace Dove, and Scandal's Jeff Perry. Watch Alaska Daily Thursday on ABC and stream next day on Hulu.
For the last few episodes, you've heard about FIFA's historical fondness for brutal authoritarians. Specifically, its appalling behavior in Chile, South Africa, and Argentina in the 1960s and 70s. So, you might ask, has FIFA changed? Has it learned any lessons? No, of course not. It's FIFA. And that brings us to today's episode. A more modern tale about FIFA's avarice. When faced with the choice between profits and human rights, ethics, and good conduct in Brazil in 2014, FIFA did what it always does. It put profits first. Screw the consequences. I'm Connor Powell. This is episode 10, White Elephants. If you travel inland 1,000 miles or so on the murky waters of the Amazon River, you're likely to catch a glimpse of the three-toed sloth, an animal so slow, algae literally grows all over its body. You might encounter charismatic and talkative gold and blue macaws by the score, their voices loud as hell. You will, without a doubt, see the massive pink-nosed river dolphin. An incredibly social mammal is excited to see you as you are to see it. But there's another species out there, an invasive one. It's the great white elephant. They've pushed people by the thousands out of their homes and trampled the fragile budgets of local governments. The Amazon, which sits mostly in the soccer-mad nation of Brazil, is the size of Spain, France, Italy, Sweden, and Greece combined. Teeming with wildlife found nowhere else, a massive river runs through its rainforest. And it's in Brazil where this white elephant infestation grows. From the remote city of Manaus, to the cattle town of Cuiabá, to the nation's capital of Brasilia. The white elephants arrived in 2014, raised, and then abandoned by the organization known as FIFA.
The 12 state-of-the-art stadiums built or refurbished are turning into white elephants, proving too costly to maintain.
The white elephants of Brazil are not like the native creatures that make the Amazon such a rich and vibrant place. No, these needy beasts are state-of-the-art soccer stadiums made of concrete, steel, and glass. Built to satisfy FIFA's punishing requirements for host countries to live up to World Cup standards.
This brand new stadium is the jewel in Manaus' crown.
Designed in the shape of a traditional basket, the seats are the colors of Amazonian fruits.
At a cost of $300 million alone, the arena of the Amazon, in the middle of Brazil's tropical rainforest, was supposed to transform Manaus, a sleepy river city, for the better.
some see the lavish temple to football as an investment that will attract tourists into the area.
No expense was spared, and that's in part because construction was a logistical nightmare. The 44,000-seat stadium was built hundreds of miles away from Brazil's nearest population center and besieged by months of torrential downpours.
Now, to help save time, parts of the stadium, like the roof, are being built in other locations.
Manaus is so remote that it's almost impossible to reach by car, which is why officials had to have the stadium materials brought in by boat.
Most of it prefabricated in Portugal. 6,700 tons of steel had to be barged up the Amazon River.
Despite the astronomical costs, the Arena of the Amazon hosted just 4 World Cup games before it was basically abandoned. Aside from a few Brazilian national team matches, a handful of birthday parties, and the occasional evangelical Christian revival, it has sat largely empty ever since the 2014 World Cup. The Manaus economy just can't support a stadium of the size FIFA demanded, with all of its skyboxes and luxury suites.
Manaus doesn't have a First League football team, and most of the locals can't afford tickets to the games.
As officials in Manaus search for new uses for the stadium, the white elephant deteriorates under the heat and humidity of the Amazon.
One loose-tongued civil servant even suggested this could become a holding zone for prisoners en route to more permanent jails.
You heard that right. Turn a world-class soccer stadium into a prison. And yet, the stadium in Manaus isn't even the worst example of Brazil's wasteful spending to meet FIFA's demands.
Everything about Mané Garrincha Stadium is big, a towering presence in Brasilia. At a cost of nearly $800 million, it was the most expensive stadium the country built for the 2014 World Cup.
These days, there's very little football being played at the world's second most expensive stadium. In fact, it mostly sits empty.
Like in Manaus, there's no First Division soccer team to bring in fans to fill the seats.
The occasional football exhibition matches are not enough to sustain the $5 million a year to maintain the stadium.
And like in Manaus, Brasilia's officials are struggling to find ways to pay for the upkeep.
Officials expected this stadium to be full. In at least one way it is, but not how they had hoped. The parking lot has been turned into a giant storage area for buses.
The term white elephant refers to the ancient fable when a rare and prized white elephant is given as a gift by the king. The recipient is blessed. After all, white elephants are sacred. The monarch favors you. Then you come to understand the curse. You can't afford to feed an elephant, and you can't give it away. It serves no practical purpose, and it's starting to eat you out of house and home. FIFA's gift of white elephants to Brazil has proven to be every bit the curse it was in the ancient tales. And what does it tell you when someone who knows all the downsides of the white elephant curse shows up at your door with an albino pachyderm? And worse, tells you it's going to make you rich. Sounds like a grift, right? Well, when FIFA arrived in Brazil with designs for extravagant stadiums, it promised the country they'd enjoy riches and glory if they built them. Of course, FIFA does what is best for FIFA. Always. After the tournament, FIFA, fat with swollen bank accounts, walked away from Brazil, leaving the country to clean up its financial mess. If you want to understand how FIFA's insatiable appetite for profits hurts real people in real places, then sit back and you'll hear the tale of the 2014 World Cup in Brazil and the curse of the white elephants, the gift that keeps on taking. The lines outside of Sao Paulo's Arena Corinthians were unbearably long and disorganized.
An hour before kick-off, long queues at ticket checks.
Thousands of excited fans, many dressed in the iconic black with white striped jerseys of the home side Corinthians, jostled as overwhelmed ticket takers struggled with the surge of bodies.
Eventually the queues got so bad that they were simply let through.
With a little more than a week to go before the opening match of the 2014 World Cup, FIFA had demanded the Brazilian Soccer Confederation stage a league match at the new stadium to iron out any issues, of which there were many. For instance, the roof wasn't finished. Despite pumping in more than $3 billion, yes, I said $3 billion into the building of new stadiums, most of Brazil's new and renovated arenas were over budget and way behind schedule.
We saw a stand which last month was still being built. It seemed nearer completion, but not near enough, as was clear once we...
I went into the arena and I was stunned.
That's Andrew Downey, veteran foreign correspondent and lifelong soccer fan who, as you might have noticed by his accent, is from Scotland. Until recently, he lived in Brazil and covered the run-up to the 2014 World Cup.
One of the big reasons for Brazil hosting the World Cup was that Brazil needed more and better infrastructure. For a World Cup, you need, roads and airports and trains and buses and all that kind of stuff. And it was a chance to modernize. And so the opportunity for Brazil in this World Cup was to add that infrastructure that would benefit the population because it was public money that was being used. And that was one of the great attractions of this World Cup. The government said, we will start building this infrastructure. This is our chance to upgrade and upgrade quickly.
Downey was at that dry run match that day in June to see firsthand what years of FIFA's demands and the Brazilian government's promises looked like in practice. He navigated the long lines and remembers the chaos and clutter in the new, still unfinished stadium. There was still lots to do, but one part was absolutely finished, and that stuck out as much as anything.
There was this enormous welcoming area, foyer, inside the stadium. And it was the most beautifully appointed thing you've ever seen. And I was just thinking, why is all this so necessary?
Like the foyer, the luxury suites were not only finished, but looked like they were plucked straight out of the Taj Mahal. It was what the lords of soccer expected, what they demanded of so-called FIFA quality stadiums.
I remember walking into the toilets, and it was like walking into the toilets at the Four Seasons because everything was marble. I'm from Scotland. I grew up watching my team Hibs in the 1980s and 1990s. And I remember when you went to the toilet was a wall at the back of the stadium, right? I'm obviously not suggesting that you should have that in a World Cup venue. But I just thought, is it really necessary for a football stadium to have marble bathrooms?
Were these new marble bathrooms and the majestic foyer really necessary for a month-long tournament? Downey wasn't the only one asking whether marble bathrooms and the majestic foyer were worth the cost. For months in the soccer-mad nation, where the cliche, soccer is like a religion, is used without irony, Brazilians have been protesting the reports of financial excess and corruption. The struggle to satisfy FIFA's stadium standards and impress the global soccer community was ripping Brazil apart. On June 20th, 2013, as the sun set over Rio de Janeiro, the lights of its famed Maracanã Stadium came on, illuminating the pitch ahead of the Confederations Cup match between Tahiti and Spain. Hundreds of thousands of Brazilians marched through the city streets towards the stadium. They weren't heading for the game. The streets had been filled with protests for weeks, some turning violent.
Brazil is ablaze with protest. Crowds have invaded the streets to voice their discontent with their government.
The protesters came from different backgrounds. Rebellious students were joined by middle-class professionals. Left-wing activists joined by traditional stay-at-home mothers. Together, as a group, they moved closer. Police, dressed like characters out of a Marvel's Avengers movie, went into battle with newly purchased riot helmets and plexiglass shields. they opened fire with a volley of rubber bullets and tear gas. These clashes between police and protesters had been on repeat night after night after night across Brazil. The trigger? The government had jacked up bus fares to cover the cost of construction for the sleek, new, modern stadiums FIFA required for the 2014 World Cup.
The government has spent more than $11 billion getting ready.
It had begun peacefully, with about 1,000 protesters moving towards the stadium, demanding that the government spend more money on health and education rather than sporting events.
People took the streets to say, "We are fed up, we want changes."
That's Carlos Veneer, a professor of urban and regional planning at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. Veneer was one of the protesters marching with his family. As the protests grew, he remembers so too did the brutality of the police response. The police, he said, were under pressure from the Brazilian government and FIFA to protect the stadiums and the soccer facilities. Downey was there too, and he confirms Veneer's account.
You would have these big matches, and outside, a kilometre away from the stadium, you would have tens of thousands of people on the streets, and the police would come and the police would fire rubber bullets and the police would fire tear gas, and it was a big deal.
The more the police tried to rein in the protest,
From Porto Alegre to Sao Paulo to Rio,
the more they grew.
The repression provoked more anger, and more people took to the streets.
These things were happening on a daily basis, and it was scary, to be honest.
Chris Gaffney is an American researcher, academic, and yes, protester. He became the English-speaking international voice of the protest movement.
And I remember sitting very clearly on Avenida Presidente Vargas and being shot at by the police with concussion grenades, rubber bullets, and being chased on motorcycles and having to run through the streets of Rio to try to find a way home. The smell of tear gas was just like my cologne for the day.
The contrast between old and new was painful. Brazil's inadequate and aging infrastructure, underfunded hospitals, and crowded schools. They all looked even more tired and beaten down in the light of the glistening new World Cup stadiums.
It was so obvious that the basic needs of the people were not being attended to, and that FIFA quality stadiums were the priority, but FIFA quality hospitals were not, and that FIFA quality schools were not. And so this kind of FIFA standard or FIFA quality came to represent the bending over backwards in fealty to the desires of a Swiss nonprofit who managed to make $4 billion in the 4-year cycle that finished in 2014. And so people saw this and were disgusted and took to the streets and were violently repressed by the very same mechanisms that were designed to secure the World Cup.
Here again is Carlos Veneer.
The main slogan that many movements at that moment used is, "We want a fair World Cup," which is a way to say we want soccer. We do not want spending billions of dollars on this. We do not want corruption on this. We want fair World Cup.
Now a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. Do you get stuck focusing on the problems in your life instead of solutions? For me, it's always worrying about, how am I going to finish all the things I need to do today? Like many people, I can get hung up worrying about my to-do list. But what if there's a better way to approach the things that stress you out? It can be tough to train your brain to stay in problem-solving mode when faced with a challenge in life. But when you learn how to find your own solutions, there's no better feeling. A therapist can help you become a better problem solver, making it easier to accomplish your goals no matter how big or small they are. If you're thinking about giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option. It's really easy. It's convenient, accessible, affordable, and entirely online. Get matched with a therapist after filling out a brief survey. And Switch therapists at any time. There aren't many things this helpful that are so easy. When you want to be a better problem solver, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/soccer today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/soccer.
If you enjoy a good murder mystery, the new Clue Escape game is where it's at. Everything you love about the original Clue game, but with an escape room twist. Join forces with your friends to escape Mr. Body's mansion, then work together to solve the murder. Was it Colonel Mustard in the conservatory with the lead pipe? Mrs. Peacock in the kitchen with the candlestick? You'll have to play to find out. Clue Escape Game. This new one-time solve mystery game is a must-have escape room experience you can bring home for your next game night. Clue is a trademark of Hasbro.
Imagine you finally buy the house of your dreams in the suburbs of New Jersey and get to move there with your 2 kids. It should be everything you dreamed of. When suddenly, right after you move in, you receive a mysterious letter that says,
"Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. Do you know the history of the house? I've been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming.
This message will not be the last.
I am the Watcher.
657 Boulevard is my obsession, and now you are too."
Believe it or not, this is the insane story of The Watcher, the new Netflix show from Ryan Murphy and Netflix. Naomi Watts and Bobby Cannavale play the married couple who have finally achieved their dream of buying a beautiful family home in New Jersey, sold to them by realtor Karen Calhoun, played by Jennifer Coolidge. Their dream soon becomes a nightmare as each new letter from The Watcher arrives. Will they find out who's behind the letters or be driven out of their home? October 13th, only on Netflix.
The violence and anger in the streets of Brazil couldn't have been further from the optimism and joy just 6 years earlier, when FIFA President Sepp Blatter stood on a stage in Zurich and in front of the world ripped open his white envelope to announce
Brazil.
With 5 World Cup titles and a booming economy, Brazil seemed like a natural pick. There's no nation more passionate about soccer, and the South American giant hadn't hosted a World Cup since 1950.
Best known for its endless beaches and yearly carnival, these days Brazil is developing a new calling card, its economy.
With most of the world's economy stagnant, Brazil's is growing at 7%.
Sao Paulo's stock market is shattering records.
Since the discovery of new offshore oil fields, the Brazilian oil industry is booming.
Brazil's president at the time, the left-leaning Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, often called just Lula for short, was one of the most popular politicians in the world, and he was eager to show the progress Brazil had made under his leadership. With low inflation, a shrinking inequality gap, and a religious zeal for soccer, Brazil was a sporting nation on the rise. Nearly 80% of Brazilians supported hosting the World Cup, with only 10% firmly against it. On Lula's watch, Brazil had also been selected to host another international sporting event, the 2016 Olympics. Journalist Dave Zirin, who wrote Brazil's Dance with the Devil, a book all about Brazil's preparations for the World Cup and the Olympics, says Lula, backed by the nodding heads of FIFA and the International Olympic Committee, promised these world events would further transform the rapidly developing nation.
This idea of bringing in the World Cup and then subsequently the Olympics in 2016 came with it so many promises about how this was going to be great for Brazil. It was going to be great for Brazil economically. It was going to be great for Brazil socio-politically. And it was going to be great for Brazil in terms of its global standing among the nations of the world. So it was all built on this idea that it was going to help. Well, the opposite took place.
As they say on Wall Street, markets go up and markets go down. By 2013, Brazil's booming economy wasn't just going down, it was crashing.
Latin America's largest economy is showing signs of a slowdown, and this is difficult to watch. You see a very promising economy slowing down quite radically.
To make matters worse, Lula had been termed out of office. Dilma Rousseff, Lula's former chief of staff, was left to manage Lula's legacy and the economic crash. The money earmarked to build the new World Cup infrastructure began to rapidly disappear, sucked up by construction and corruption. Brazil was forced to raise taxes, cut basic services, and borrow from international markets to pay for the ever-increasing costs.
There was a widespread anger that all this money was being spent for FIFA and for football rather than being spent on ordinary Brazilians.
It was 2013 and Rousseff tried to thread the political pandering needle as protesters flooded Brazil's streets. She condemned the violence, but she said she also supported the protesters' right to demonstrate and called for dialogue. What Dilma Rousseff didn't do was push back against FIFA. You know, the guys who were insisting not just on new stadiums, but a particular style of new stadiums with marble atriums and luxury suites. Scaling back the extravagance was not something FIFA would even contemplate. Meanwhile, resources for promised improvements to roads, subways, and airports, related infrastructure that would benefit more than just soccer, were redirected to help meet FIFA's stadium construction deadlines. The gap between what Brazilians had been promised and what they were seeing being built for FIFA only widened. As the protests grew, FIFA did what it normally does, stayed quiet. But behind the scenes, FIFA did not adjust or reevaluate their demands. What FIFA wanted, FIFA was going to get.
There were all sorts of, like a death by 1,000 cuts sent the economy into a downward spiral. And yet FIFA doesn't care if your economy is in bad shape. They want their FIFA quality stadiums.
Dave Zirin says FIFA's indifference and greed had real-world consequences.
They felt like they needed to push ahead, which led to cost cutting, which led to corruption, which led to a lot of dissatisfaction among the people who felt like their needs were being ignored while stadiums were being built.
The first punches were thrown seconds after the final whistle blew. The full row of green stadium seats came hurling through the air and onto the pitch. Countless other pieces of trash and debris, some on fire, came raining down from every part of the stadium. It was 2009. Hundreds of supporters of the Brazilian side Coritiba stormed their home pitch. Khaki-clothed police officers swung their batons wildly and fired rubber bullets, trying to beat back the enraged soccer hooligans. The chaos erupted after Coritiba's shocking relegation to Brazil's domestic second division, meaning for non-soccer fanatics, they had the worst record and so they got booted down to a lower division. Their fans went ballistic. It was the very type of soccer violence Brazilian lawmakers had hoped to end when they banned the sale of alcohol in stadiums 6 years earlier.
In 2003, the Brazilian government banned alcohol from stadiums because of the enormously high death rate amongst fans.
Though stamping out all of the violence completely was proving to be difficult, that ban on alcohol had saved lives and helped reduce violence. But as the 2014 tournament neared, Brazil's ban on alcohol in stadiums became a flashpoint of contention for World Cup organizers.
Jerome Valcke, the General Secretary of football's world governing body, has urged the Brazilian government to approve a law which allows the sale of beer at World Cup venues.
For more than 25 years, the red Budweiser logo had adorned nearly every corner of FIFA's World Cup advertising. The King of Beers is one, in a massive cavalcade of advertisers whose commercials bombard TV sets during World Cup matches. Brazil's ban on alcohol in stadiums threatened FIFA's money-making machine. And the only thing worse than the loss in advertising for FIFA would be the loss of lucrative in-game beer sales. And FIFA wasn't about to let that happen. Just listen to FIFA's General Secretary Jerome Valcke.
I'm sorry to say, and maybe I look a bit arrogant, but that's something we'll not negotiate. I mean, there will be, and there must be, as part of the law, the fact that we have the right to sell beer.
Brazil had enacted this ban in 2003. faced with a staggering level of soccer violence and preventable deaths, it's hard to argue this law wasn't completely reasonable. And yet, FIFA, a nonprofit whose stated mission is to grow and protect the game of soccer, not to earn money, demanded Brazil remove the ban, which, of course, Brazil ended up doing. Beer would be sold at World Cup games. But at least if FIFA was going to make money off of beer sales, Brazil could count on tax revenue and profit sharing as part of its hosting duties, right?
Well, and they're going to make money as well as the money they're spending.
Actually, FIFA makes the money. This is where the controversy is. The country usually doesn't make money. FIFA, the organization of the World Cup, is who makes the money.
Despite spending north of $3 billion on FIFA-required stadiums and ending public safety laws aimed at preventing alcohol-related violence, Brazil wasn't guaranteed a penny for hosting the World Cup tournament.
It is FIFA and its FIFA subsidiaries that are fully exempt from any tax whatsoever levied at whatever level, state level, municipality level, all sorts of taxes, consumption taxes, income taxes, you name it, it's all exempt.
Remember, the rules of the game are rigged by FIFA for FIFA. So not only is FIFA blessed with a tax exemption as part of its hosting requirements, so are all of FIFA's corporate sponsors. In 2014, Brazil spent $15 billion to host the World Cup. FIFA earned nearly $5 billion from World Cup advertising deals and sponsorship agreements. Brazil's cut? Zero. The final insult? FIFA security demands. FIFA, of course, understood the hazards of combining alcohol and a fan base with a history of soccer violence. Drunken hooliganism has been an issue in world soccer for decades. But add to the mix a population worried about a crashing economy and angry at the bejeweled stadiums springing up amidst a crumbling infrastructure, and the 2014 World Cup was beginning to look like a powder keg ready to explode. Now a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. Do you get stuck focusing on the problems in your life instead of solutions? For me, it's always worrying about, how am I going to finish all the things I need to do today? Like many people, I can get hung up worrying about my to-do list. But what if there's a better way to approach the things that stress you out? It can be tough to train your brain to stay in problem-solving mode when faced with a challenge in life. But when you learn how to find your own solutions, there's no better feeling. A therapist can help you become a better problem solver, making it easier to accomplish your goals no matter how big or small they are. If you're thinking about giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option. It's really easy. It's convenient, accessible, affordable, and entirely online. Get matched with a therapist after filling out a brief survey, and switch therapists at any time. There aren't many things this helpful that are so easy. When you want to be a better problem solver, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/soccer today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/soccer.
If you enjoy a good murder mystery, the new Clue Escape game is where it's at. Everything you love about the original Clue game, but with an escape room twist. Join forces with your friends to escape Mr. Body's mansion, then work together to solve the murder. Was it Colonel Mustard in the conservatory with the lead pipe? Mrs. Peacock in the kitchen with the candlestick? You'll have to play to find out. Clue Escape Game. This new one-time solve mystery game is a must-have escape room experience you can bring home for your next game night. Clue is a trademark of Hasbro.
Imagine you finally buy the house of your dreams in the suburbs of New Jersey and get to move there with your 2 kids. It should be everything you dreamed of. When suddenly, right after you move in, you receive a mysterious letter that says,
Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. Do you know the history of the house? I've been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming.
This message will not be the last.
I am the watcher.
657 Boulevard is my obsession, and now you are too.
Believe it or not, this is the insane story of The Watcher, the new Netflix show from Ryan Murphy and Netflix. Naomi Watts and Bobby Cannavale play the married couple who have finally achieved their dream of buying a beautiful family home in New Jersey, sold to them by realtor Karen Colhoun, played by Jennifer Coolidge. Their dream soon becomes a nightmare as each new letter from the Watcher arrives. Will they find out who's behind the letters or be driven out of their home? October 13th, only on Netflix.
As soccer fans lined up to enter Rio's Maracanã Stadium on July 13, 2014, for the final game, the images were dazzling. Argentinian fans wore the classic light blue and white striped jerseys. Germany's fans donned white and red Adidas tops with black trim. Mixed in were the bright, almost electric yellow kits of host country Brazil. Standing in stark contrast to all the bright colors were the drab, olive-green military uniforms of the Brazilian security forces.
Come Sunday, Rio de Janeiro may look like an occupied city. 25,000 troops, military police, firefighters, and National Guardsmen are being deployed, largest ever in the city's history.
The sight of troops standing along roads and at intersections in heavily clad riot gear became the persistent image of the tournament. And everything was only amped for the final match, which was played under a draconian security blanket. Israeli drones flew above the stadium. American-provided bomb-busting robots patrolled outside, while German anti-aircraft tanks kept watch over the skies.
No one can accuse Brazil of scrimping on security for soccer's biggest event. The country totaled nearly $1 billion in security costs, 5 times what South Africa spent during the 2010 Cup.
You've surely noticed that since the terror attacks of 2001, security at large gatherings, including public sporting events, has become increasingly militarized. But Brazil and FIFA security setup in 2014, while state-of-the-art, was something altogether different and unheard of in world sport.
Brazilian authorities are leaving nothing to chance. 170,000 security forces will be mobilized throughout the country.
There are now more security forces on the ground in Brazil than the United States deployed at the height of the Iraq War.
Brazil, a country with no international enemies or history of domestic terror, had created a full-on World Cup army. An army whose weapons were trained not on some foreign enemy, but on the very people the World Cup was supposed to benefit. This massive security force was never about stopping a terror attack or even solving Brazil's stunningly high murder rate. It was required by FIFA to pacify Brazil's own population, which had grown increasingly hostile to the soccer organization and the Brazilian government. By the time the first game kicked off in 2014, Brazilian public opinion had swung wildly against the World Cup. Where once it was 80% in favor when Sepp Blatter announced the winning bid,
more than 60% of Brazilians believe hosting the World Cup is bad.
When you have Brazilians protesting soccer, you know something went very wrong.
As journalist Dave Zirin points out, if you need a U.S. military-sized army to keep security during a soccer tournament in a nation of soccer fans, then yes, something has gone seriously wrong.
It was slowly instituted in preparation for the World Cup, like terrific surveillance, a tremendous surveillance, and as well as things like water cannons and concussion grenades. Like it's not just about the weaponry; it's about a plan and a mode of attack against your own population.
It wasn't just the massive spending on FIFA stadiums that angered the Brazilian public, though that was a big part of it. And it wasn't just the appearance of troops. It's what the military actually did. In the lead up to the World Cup, Brazil's newly created, heavy-handed security force was trained by a who's who of international security conglomerates. They included Academy, which you'll know by its former name, Blackwater, the infamous private security company used during the Iraq War, and the Israeli firm, Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, which has long provided the backbone for the Israeli blockade around Gaza and its military occupation of the Palestinian West Bank. These firms didn't just provide security, They paved the way for the forced displacement of tens of thousands of Brazilians and entire neighborhoods for the World Cup.
One such slum, Rio's huge Mare Favela complex, was recently pacified after an operation involving hundreds of men, tanks, and helicopters.
And by pacified, they mean removed. From the safety of its bunker in Zurich, FIFA's leadership pushed for all of this additional security. It was unlike any other sporting event ever.
FIFA brings with it debt displacement and the militarization of public space. It takes two to tango. And what FIFA looks for is willing nations that are willing to, march to the beat of FIFA's drum.
In Brazil, FIFA found a willing partner. That partnership, however, enriched FIFA and ripped apart Brazil. Here's Chris Gaffney.
What do we have at the end is, 64 games of football and a country that is now in economic shambles.
Today, the high-speed train that connects Sao Paulo's largest airport to its city center is rarely late. The modern metro is a much-needed addition, but the project itself was anything but on time. It first opened in April of 2018. It was originally one of the many infrastructure projects promised as part of Brazil's World Cup bid. It was supposed to be ready when the tournament kicked off in 2014, but the high-speed rail line was ditched as money was diverted to key World Cup infrastructure projects like stadiums, especially those empty, crumbling white elephant stadiums that now infest places like Manaus and Cuiabá. The fact that the train line to the airport was completed, even 4 years later, makes it unique. Dozens of other promised infrastructure projects from Brazil's original World Cup plan, from roads to train lines, have yet to be built, and probably never will be. When Brazil was awarded the World Cup by FIFA back in 2007, the country had dreams of glory, confident it would win a record 6th championship and show the world the progress Brazil had achieved. It was a narrative FIFA was all too willing to inflate and encourage. FIFA's demands for its World Cup, and let's be very clear, every tournament is FIFA's and not the host nation's, brought out the worst in Brazil. After months of civil unrest, a ton of unfinished public works projects, a new draconian security system, a $15 billion price tag, and Brazil's 7-1 thrashing at the hands of Germany in the World Cup semifinal, the 2014 World Cup is anything but glorious. And what are the long-term consequences? Today, Brazil has been ravaged by the COVID-19 virus. Its economy has crashed and stagnated. And its right-wing government, led by Jair Bolsonaro, is sending signals. It will use Brazil's new, robust security apparatus, built under the direction of FIFA, to stay in power no matter what. You've heard a lot about the bad in world soccer under FIFA. Decades of corruption and generations of abuse. It might make you wonder if there's any reason to be hopeful. The answer is yes, absolutely yes. And it starts with a team of outsiders who push to be treated as equals. Could the answer to FIFA's corruption be women's soccer? That's coming up next on the Lords of Soccer. The Lords of Soccer, How FIFA Stole the Beautiful Game, is an Inside Voices media production in conjunction with iHeartRadio. The series was written and executive produced by Gary Scott and me, Connor Powell. Special thanks to Giselia Rossi for helping me with the trickiest of the Brazilian names. If I screwed up, it's on me, not her. Logan Heftel and Katie McMurrin provided the sound design with assistance from JC Swadek and Jake Bluenote. Alec Cowan is our associate producer, and Jeffrey Katz was our story editor. Our fact checker is Alexa O'Brien. And thanks to Miles Gray, who produced this series for iHeartRadio. If you have any comments or questions, please reach out. You can find us on Twitter. I'm at Connor M. Powell, and Gary is at Gary Robert Scott. And if you have any stories about FIFA, let us know. If you like what you hear, please give us a shout out at the hashtag Lords of Soccer.
You know you'll rest easy on the perfect Casper mattress. But did you know you can pay easy too? Affirm offers transparent, flexible, and balanced financing so you can buy now and pay over time. Affirm has no late fees with flexible monthly payments as low as 0% APR. Now through October 16th, save $600 off your dream mattress during our Sleeptober sale. Visit Casper.com or a store near you. Exclusions apply. Financing subject to eligibility check. More at Casper.com/financing.
It's not just business, it's personal. And Signature Theater's new musical, No Place to Go. When dedicated employee George discovers his company is relocating to Mars, he must decide whether to go and uproot his family's life or embark on an unknown venture. Featuring DC star Bobby Smith, No Place to Go is an irreverent and humorous musical with an enterprising twist. Now playing at Signature Theater through October 16th. Get your tickets at sigtheater.org.
If you could completely remove one phrase from your vocabulary, which phrase would you choose?
I don't know.
Correct answer!
No, I meant I don't know which phrase.
And the best way to banish I don't know from your life is by cramming your brain full of stuff you should know. Join your hosts, Josh and Chuck, on the super popular podcast packed with fascinating discussions on science, history, pop culture, and more. Episodes that ask, was the lost city of Atlantis real?
I don't know.
Is birth order important?
I don't know.
How does pizza work?
Well, I do know a bit about that. See,
you can know even more, because Stuff You Should Know has over 1,500 immensely interesting episodes for your brain to feast on. So what do you say?
I don't want to miss the Stuff You Should Know podcast?
You're learning already. Listen to Stuff You Should Know on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.